Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us live today on Beyond Skin's Facebook page, or catching us on demand on BuildaBriidge's YouTube platform. As you're aware, this event is held in celebration of Human Rights Week, hence the event title, Humans and Their Law. My name is Arianna McBurney, and I will lead the event today. A little insight on me: I am a third-year undergraduate student of Common and Civil Law with Hispanic Studies at Queens University Belfast. I am also a Beyond Skins Youth for Peace ambassador, and am on the United Network of Young Peacebuilders European Youth Advocacy team. Quite a mouthful. Joining me is Ami Yars. By way of introduction, Ami, thank you for being with us today. Please tell us a bit about yourself and your work. Oh, Ami, I think you're muted.
Thank you. So BuildaBriidge International is based in Philadelphia. We're an arts and intervention organization using the arts as a holistic way to help people overcome trauma and hardship. So through our pedagogy and our practices, we try to instill and foster self-efficacy, resilience, and literally hope-infused futures. If you're able to hope, it is an amazing and great sign to be able to overcome trauma. And we're currently using some of our art making to help the lives of frontline responders for human service organizations that are dealing directly with people affected from COVID. So using the arts to help people improve their quality of life. Thanks for having me.
That's incredible. Thank you, Ami. We are also delighted to have with us Catherine Miller-Wilson. By way of introduction, Catherine, could you also tell us a bit about yourself and your work?
Sure. Thank you so much. I'm really thrilled to be here with all of you. As Arianna indicated, my name is Catherine Miller-Wilson. I'm the executive director of HIAS Pennsylvania, which is an on-the-ground local nonprofit immigration legal services and social services agencies for low-income immigrants in the Pennsylvania area. I've been executive director since November 1st, 2016, which is my favorite opening joke. I had 8 days of excited planning, and then the world came to an end. So anyway, that's my story. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. I'm also thrilled to say that we have with us Pamela Mutale Kapakele. Pamela, if you could also tell us a bit about yourself and what you do as well.
Thank you. I'm so happy and grateful to be given this opportunity to talk to you and the world. My name is Pamela, as indicated, Kapakele. I'm a journalist, entrepreneur in the energy sector, and I'm also the executive director of an organization called OpenNet4.0 Zambia, whose aim is to amplify voices in remote areas. So we are based in southern Zambia in a small town called Choma. That's where I am right now. And we are a community-based organization, and we help people connect to power, national processes, and opportunities.
That's incredible.
That's
Thank you. Lastly, but certainly by no means least, we also have with us Mim Suleiman. Mim, could you also briefly tell us a bit about yourself and some of the work you do? Oh, Mim, I think you're on mute.
I know.
Perfect.
Hi, everybody. So great to be here and to be amongst amazing people like yourselves, and to share, to have this platform to share and to raise awareness in all forms. My name is Mim Suleiman. I'm a singer-songwriter, composer, feminist, female, why shouldn't I? Teacher, performer, and I fight for human rights all the way. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Mim. So we're going to start off the session by asking Ami, first of all, some questions. So let's delve in. So Ami, my first question to you is, from your perspective, how do the restorative arts contribute to the protection and creation of universal human rights? Ami, I think you're on mute again, sorry.
After almost a year of doing this, you'd think I know where the unmute button is, So we call the arts that we do with BuildaBriidge with restorative because we believe that through access to the imagination and creativity, we help people become more hopeful. And I mentioned earlier that the idea of hopefulness is something that's taken away when someone experiences trauma or hardship, that their external and internal resources are compromised so much that it literally has a biological effect on them. And also the social aspect of living is also deeply damaged. And so by engaging in the art process, it's a way of equalizing a person to their environment again, that through this little mastery of small art projects and being able to work on a process and having mentorship and literally a small community involved with supporting that person, that can help a person find the internal strength they already have resilience, that recognizing that they are a resilient person, and to help them and mobilize that, leverage that into being to advocate for themselves more. And lastly, that idea is that being creative is the opposite of hopelessness. You're envisioning something, you're doing something tangible. And so this idea, people that have experienced trauma and hardship, or in general, the idea of universal human rights, that I think everybody deserves the opportunity to be creative and to have that opportunity to be hopeful. And I think too often the status quo from country to country, whether it's the global South or global North, or whether you live in a certain neighborhood, that access to a safe environment that promotes the individual to thrive is compromised. And so art, along with other social service providers, we see as a way to create a better social fabric. And additionally, people that play music together, they're creating a sense of community. And literally the biological and neurological effects of it, that they're creating organization out of chaos. So not only are you seeing that physically and musically, but you're actually neurologically benefiting from that as well. Doing the visual arts is also a way of expressing the internal externally. Doing dance as a way of kinesthetically responding to something. And all these things are incredible ways to generate the human spirit. And so by not having access to these safe environments to be able to be creative and imaginative is a way of losing out on an unalienable human right to be creative and to thrive. And so BuildaBriidge uses the arts to help people be creative and thrive.
Perfect, thank you. And adding on to what you just said, my next question is, how are the arts and being creative impacting on the lives of refugees in Philadelphia?
Well, it's great that Catherine's here, because BuildaBriidge and myself personally has had a relationship with HIAS for a number of years, as well as the Nationality Service Center, another provider of refugee services. And together we were working on a project to make sure that refugees who've experienced torture specifically were getting the services they needed. And we were doing weekly art making sessions with them in an open studio session. So come as you are, a no holds barred artistic experience that culminated actually in 2 trips or 3 trips to Liberty Island to see the Statue of Liberty. And that whole process of helping. Also, a lot of these refugees don't get out of Philadelphia. These people who come here as refugees don't have the mobility. So to get them out into New York or Jersey City to have lunch on Liberty Island and learn a little bit about the immigration experience. And what's also even more interesting, not interesting, but meaningful, is that, the first trips were in 2017, and that, they were learning about the narrative of how there was pushback against Irish immigration, against Jewish immigration, against Chinese immigration, against Japanese immigration. Unfortunately, our history has a rich history of denying access to the other, to the privileges that we have in the United States. But that doesn't mean there aren't people fighting for the rights of those new immigrants to our community. And that was the most, I think, telling and beautiful thing to be able to do with our work with refugees.
Incredible. Now I'm moving on to kind of a different topic, but my next question is, what is your opinion on the universal healthcare system? Since we know that in the US, you cannot enjoy the right to free healthcare, unlike in, for example, the UK, or the right to healthcare in general.
So just to give a little bit of background also on myself, that I'm also a student of social policy, and I believe that arts and culture are a part of good social policy. And seeing that and studying that, I learned about other forms of social policy. So going into healthcare specifically is a really big issue in America, because it's not universal, it's not easily accessible, and there's a big pushback to have something that is universal. The irony is that, one of the first universal healthcare systems established in a state was in Massachusetts by a Republican governor, Mitt Romney, a number of years ago. For people who can't afford healthcare, we have something called Medicaid, which is also a form of socialized medicine, universal medicine. For our elders who have retired, they have access to Medicare, which is also another form of socialized healthcare. So the rhetoric in the United States has been polarized in such a way, and there's a great deal of pejorative terms that are stressed when it comes to universal healthcare. It's communist, it's socialist, it's too progressive, and people need to work for their healthcare. The irony is we have the systems in place to make universal healthcare possible. We just don't have the political leadership and enough push from the populations to establish something like that. I mean, you look at the last election, like, a 52-48 split between Biden and Trump. And a lot of those people who did not vote for Biden are not for universal health care. So it's a huge irony of something that could be so helpful for our society, like access to health care. Why is my health compromised as an individual? I'm owed that as a human being. And that's not how we function in the United States. And so a lot of times wealth determines your access to health care. And it's a hard precedent to deal with, honestly.
Completely. My last question for you, Ami, is the US living up to its reputation? Or what is truly needed to make America, for lack of a better phrase, great again?
Wow. So what is America's reputation? I think myself, I lived in the Middle East for 9 years and had the opportunity to teach about civil rights and American history through its music to Palestinians and Israelis, and did that in Germany as well. And I've done that in Sweden. And so I have this background of these beautiful events taking place in American history for the rights of the others. But, when I returned from the Middle East in 2014, there was Ferguson. There was the murdering of Black men and women by police forces in the United States. And it was the exact opposite narrative of what I was trying to teach and express, that I'd grown up with this ideology that, the civil rights movement, we had won, people got the right to vote, people were safe. But we have an incredible demoralizing history of oppression towards people, to minorities in the United States, Black, brown, indigenous, transgender, non-binary, Jewish, Christian. We have this horrible history, but we also have, a democratic society that can choose to move forward, and we've seen that in action. We've seen the power of people coming together. But unfortunately, in the political climate that we're in, the social environment that we're in, and you can look at COVID as an example of this specifically, that and this is a historical issue in general, that we've been arguing over the individual rights versus the rights of the community. And right now, the rights of the individual have taken over the importance of us being a community and being a nation that stands together. We've taken that separate but equal idea a little bit too seriously, and it's damaging us. And truly, I'm having a hard time figuring out what a great America was, because we've had great moments, but I think this country is always in development, always needing to be improved upon. And as much as the advancements that American society has offered in terms of the world, there's a lot of harm that our nation, my nation, has caused to other people. And it's part of my duty is to help bring people together. BuildaBriidge's job to help bring people together, to try to create some kind of cohesiveness that can move us forward in a direction that's not just helpful to us as Americans, but helpful around the world.
Thank you so much, Ami. That was so insightful. Thank you. Catherine, if it's okay, I'm going to ask you a few questions now. So my first question Perfect. My first question to you would have to be, why is it so hard to obtain refugee status?
Well, do you have, 10 years? No. It's hard for a number of different reasons. The process of obtaining refugee status that we use across the world today was created at its base in 1965 in the aftermath of World War II, when the world looked on in horror about what had happened in Germany to the Jews and said, never again. And they created the Geneva Convention and many other international laws, creating a structure and an infrastructure for helping refugees across the world. So the way the process works currently is that someone who's being persecuted by their government based on their religion, their ethnicity, their belonging to a certain social group, and or because of war that has broken out, or politics, flees from their country of origin and looks for safe haven as near as possible to where they're fleeing from. If they run into a UN-run refugee camp or into a place where there are no camps, but they can seek assistance at a UN aid office, they present themselves and they're asked in the first instance, what happened and why are you here? And if they establish that they are there because of persecution based on one of those 5 reasons, then they can be determined to be a refugee, as that term is internationally defined. Once they're determined to be a refugee, the next step is to determine what needs to happen or what can happen. The first question is there any possibility of having them repatriate in their country of origin? If the answer to that question is no, then there's a determination about where they should go. In large part, that determination is based on all the countries who have signed on to the Geneva Convention about their annual numbers of refugees that they're willing to resettle. So the United States, since 1980, has always provided every September 30th a refugee ceiling that is determined by the president. Until 2016, that ceiling was anywhere between 110,000 to 210,000. The United States has always been a leader in accepting refugees until 2016. When President Trump was elected, the first thing that he did after inauguration in January 2017 was to lower the 110,000 ceiling that was set by President Obama. He lowered it to an unprecedented lower number of, I believe it was 50,000 that year. That number continued to lower every single year that he has been in office, up to and including the current year where he lowered it to 18,000. That makes us clearly no longer the leader and, in fact, the bottom of nations willing to accept and welcome refugees. We have lost our leadership in the world as a nation that assists refugees. And to our horror and our shame, we are not helping the more than 79 million displaced people. But I digress. So whichever nation whose turn it is to take on the refugees at that moment will then take on the particular refugee that has presented him or herself. And at that point, they undergo that nation's security vetting process. Since the events of September 11th, 2001, the United States vetting process has been the most vigorous in the world. It's an 8-step, time-sensitive process. So at each step along the way, when you get clearance, you get pushed to the next step. If the next step causes delays, that creates a prior step to expire, you then get sent back to the beginning to start all over again. So when the overseas vetting offices are appropriately staffed by the United States, the 8-step process, although time-consuming, is manageable. But one of the other things that the current administration did, in addition to lowering the ceiling, was to de-staff those offices. So there are refugees that have been waiting for years. In past decades, when staffing has been too low, we've resettled refugees who've been in refugee camps for 20 years. We resettled a family where the parents were born in a refugee camp, raised in a refugee camp, married in a refugee camp, and arrived pregnant with their first child. So this is a devastating reality and problem, because in refugee camps, although there is food, and there is some amount of learning, there isn't formal schooling, there isn't appropriate nutrition, there isn't appropriate employment training, so that what has happened is, by delaying the security vetting and delaying the ability to arrive in the United States, people are arriving without the skills that they need because they haven't been living a normal life. They've been stuck in a refugee camp, waiting and waiting and waiting. Once they are cleared for travel, they go on a list that is circulated to circulated to all of 9 national, what's called voluntary agencies. And there is a national agency called HIAS that is affiliated with HIAS Pennsylvania for purposes of refugee resettlement, but is independent. Each of those 9 agencies has affiliate on-the-ground refugee resettlement agencies across the country. HIAS is one of the smaller national voluntary agencies. They have 16 on-the-ground resettlement agencies. Some of the larger ones have up to 25 or 30. Those 9 agencies meet every single week and review the list of people who are cleared for travel and divvy them up amongst themselves. Once it's determined which refugee will go to which national agency, the national agencies will then determine which city or town the refugee will be sent to, and then we'll send an email to the affiliate appropriate to that town. How those decisions are made are a little bit mysterious, but there are some factors that have a common thread. So, for example, a refugee with a very medically needy child will often be sent to Philadelphia because of CHOP. A refugee who's struggling with LGBTQ issues will be sent to either Philadelphia, San Francisco, or New York, because those are very gay-friendly cities. A refugee from Somalia will usually be sent to Minnesota because of the large and supportive Somalian community there. So those are some factors. It's never a guarantee, and it's often based on resources and who has received last week's refugees. Once that email is sent to the affiliate can accept or reject. HIAS Pennsylvania, like most on-the-ground resettlement agencies, rarely rejects a request for resettlement. And so once we accept, we then have 10 days to provide housing and get a team to meet the refugee at the airport. And then under federal rules, we have 90 days to provide a huge number of services to help that refugee integrate. At the end of 90 days, we hold an exit interview, and hopefully, if we've done our job correctly, the refugee is what's known as self-sufficient, and we then close their case. So that's how refugee resettlement works in the United States. As you can see, it's a pretty complex and multi-layered process. So there are enormous delays. So
that sounds very lengthy. Thank you for explaining that, Catherine. My next question to you is, as you're aware, we all have the absolute right to not be tortured. It is, however, been estimated by the Freedom from Torture organization that 30% of asylum seekers have experienced torture. My question to you is thus, how do we prevent this attack on our right to not be tortured? And why do you think it is predominantly asylum seekers who are being tortured and their rights not being protected?
Asylum seekers, by definition, are people who have been persecuted by their government, and whether that form of persecution takes the form of the international definition of torture is a sort of matter of chance, and how the government is engaging in the persecution. So that's why most asylum seekers are in fact victims of torture, because of the definition of who an asylum seeker is. How to prevent torture? That is a much more difficult question, complex and layered. I think many more intelligent and well-versed people than me have studied the issue of torture and why people engage in it, why governments, move swiftly from sort of trying to do what's right for their country, to trying to do what's right for themselves, to then going into some weird spin of sadistic behavior. That is not something that I can really answer, but I can tell you that a way to minimize torture is really justice. So much of what happens in the world that is negative is about injustice and perpetuating injustice and failing to listen and failing to see the humanity in one another. What we've just experienced the last 4 years was terrifying if it had not been stopped, because it is exactly the kind of thing that governments who have committed torture have done in the past, which is to take human beings and talk about them as if they are not human beings. And when you convince people that other people are not humans, it enables first callous disregard and then active violence. And that's some of what we've seen in the separation of children and placing them in cages. Those government officials, some saw what was happening and resigned in protest and described sleepless nights. Others were able to engage in it because they accepted the dehumanizing rhetoric that was being perpetuated by our government. So.
Thank you so much, Catherine. For time's sake, I'm going to move on and ask Pamela some questions now, if that's okay. So my first question to you, Pamela, is, in Zambia, how has the influence of tradition restrained the impact of the constitutional law?
Well, traditional laws are the laws that we're using before the English introduced the common law as we know it, the one that has statutes in our constitution. So it has a lot of influence because that is the law that we knew before a strange one was introduced to us. And also Zambia, after independence, continued to use the traditional law. It recognized it in the constitution, as well as the general law, the one that we inherited from the British. And this traditional law constitutes of rules and practices generated by different ethnic groups. We have 73 ethnic groups in Zambia. So each of those groups contributes some sort of rules and practices that they practice. And these have never really been codified or unified in Zambia to come up with one which has a national character. Each group has its own rules and practices. So it has a lot of influence on what the constitutional law.
Perfect, thank you. And my next question would be, can you explain to us the problems that there are in Zambia regarding kangaroo courts?
Okay, so these kangaroo courts, which are based in tradition, as I've explained, they regulate the rights, liabilities, and duties of different individuals in an ethnic grouping. So a woman will be given a place, a man will be given a place. Obviously, women are considered to be low class or substandard according to tradition. The men always have an upper hand over women. And bear in mind that these laws have never been written down, so they don't really emphasize or respect ethics of justice, such as fairness, and they do not uphold the rule of law. And also, in most ethnic groupings, the tribal chief, he's the final authority. So depending on the person who's chief that time, the law will be fair or not. It all depends on that person and his village men and people like that, because those are the people that constitute the justice system in the traditional sense. And also, these structures, they've never really been, I must mention, when we got independence in 1964, there was an attempt to unify the traditional laws. So the country came up with then the Local Courts Act, and this is being implemented alongside the kangaroo courts that you talk about. So the kangaroo court part is not really officially recognized, but it goes on. And most Zambians, we are very traditional. So when something happens to me, I would rather go to the traditional leadership as compared to the other one. So we are so rooted in tradition, but the case is different for Zambians in urban areas. They would rather use the common law, but we must bear in mind that over tens of Zambians live in remote areas. So most of them are not even aware about the provisions of the common law that we inherited from the British.
Thank you, Pamela. And do you find that the traditional laws especially are biased against women, or is it just, against both sides find it hard with the traditional law?
Well, in Africa, most of our practices, women are less favored in most of our African settings, especially when it comes to rules and regulations. Women are less favored. For example, a woman can be advised to stay in an abusive home because tradition demands that a woman's marriage should not end. So the man can be beating you, and your relatives will tell you not to tell anyone about it. We have this system which we call Shipikisha Club, meaning hanging there. As a woman, you're supposed to endure that and make sure that your marriage continues. And also, a woman, when she commits adultery, the marriage can end. But if a man does the same, our tradition says that a man's adultery cannot end the marriage. So that shows that women are not really given a place that they should have as human beings in society. And also, our traditions make those easy targets for early marriages. You find a 13-year-old. Today I was visited by a 15-year-old who has 3 children. And I was like, oh my God, where did you get the kids from? At 15, she has 3 kids, meaning she started having them maybe around 9 or 10. So this is very sad. And in Southern Province, where I live, in Southern Zambia, a woman is not supposed to own land. So if she comes in possession of land, it should be titled to a male child or a brother, or she can surrender it to the husband. And it is also acceptable for a woman to be beaten as a way of disciplining her. And also, here in Southern Province, a man can marry as many wives as he wants, and those women are used as labor in the farms. And they really don't have a lot of say in what goes on around there, that they have to sacrifice their hopes and dreams and just save the man who has married them. And also here in Choma, where I live, we do not have even one single woman representing the people as a councillor. All of them are male. And we've noticed as OpenNet, when we do our community work, women rarely speak unless you call upon them. You just have to put them on the spot to speak. They are not allowed to speak in public. They keep quiet and the men do all the talking. So that is really disturbing, and it has to change.
Thank you for sharing that. And on the topic of change, What needs done from your perspective? How can we change the situation?
So first of all, we need to address the issue of ignorance, because most of our traditional authorities are not knowledgeable about the common law that our constitution, the statutes in our constitution, they do not understand them. So there is need to sensitize them on the rights of women as provided for by the laws of Zambia. And also, we need to speak truth to power. It's been 40 years since the United Nations introduced to the world the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women. And our country, Zambia, is a signatory to that protocol. So it's time as civil society we start reminding them that we signed that protocol and we should domesticate it to ensure that it's enforceable, that will give rights to all the women, because this is the International Bill of Rights for all women. So as civil society, we need to take an interest in that and push that agenda. And also we need to recognize that tradition and culture are dynamic and they can and do change. So it is up to those of us who are alive today to ensure that we protect the position of a woman in our cultural structures. Because when we do that, we'll reduce poverty, because most poverty-stricken people are women. We'll break that cycle of poverty, then we'll be stopping the violence against women, as well as providing access to education and healthcare and reducing economical and political inequalities. And I must recommend Zambia for some inspiring gender-sensitive policies that they've come up with since 2015. But we should not just leave those good policies on paper. We should leave the talk and make sure that we are acting on them.
Thank you so much, Pamela. I agree, things need to change. Mim, I'm now going to ask you a few questions. So my first question to you would have to be, what made you become interested in the topic of albino rights? And how important was Salif Keita's music in opening your eyes to the persecution of persons with albinism? Oh, Mim, your mic, sorry.
Hi, are we back?
Yes, perfect.
Yeah, Salif Keita, Salif Keita was the person, the artist, the one that made me aware of what was happening in Tanzania with albino. And I was shocked. I had no idea as a Tanzanian that this was going on. And when I looked at it, I had to do something about it. I had to be active in bringing this to my people to remind me that this thing is going on. So yeah, it was very important to be part of that. And I felt being blessed with a platform of, as Ami was saying, this creative to be able to help and bring awareness to others in the world. It was important to me. I did that. So that's how it happened. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And tell us a bit about the second song you ever composed and how it is about the fight for human rights.
Okay, well, it started off something that I was fighting myself. So it was coming from myself as a female, artist that was a female that was denied so much. I faced so much oppression. It may be simple for others, but people who are like us, who wants to be out there and have something to do for the world, it can be very oppressive. And the oppression that I felt just didn't make any sense. Most of the time, if you wanted anything, they'll just say you can't because you're a woman. That bothered me. That was one of the things. Another thing was when you go into the art of music, when I first started, trying to find myself because I went into it quite late. I grew up in Zanzibar, by the way, as a teenager. And coming to live in the UK was obviously 2 different lives, so I had to fit in different things. But music or the art came to me much later on in my life. So having to understand that brought me into like, well, I should have started this a bit earlier. I felt like a bit had done by at one point. I felt, well, gosh, I needed this earlier. So the joy of being so free and having that right that Ami was saying, spiritual right to explore, is yours. So hence I wrote to Mengi, and Mengi does that. Mengi fight for that and say, this is your right, this is your birthright, you were born to live, to inquire, to educate, to be educated, to seek all the knowledge. No, you can't do this just because I say so. It's got to stop. Semingi. And
I
that
agree.
one
Thank
is,
you.
yeah. It's called Mingi. Mingi, yeah. In Swahili.
Lastly, my last question for you, Mim, is if you could tell us about the film you're going to star in.
Okay, the film is called Usista. Usista is a musical road trip movie to East Africa, The Woman Behind the Wheel, which I star in. And it's basically to create an archive for East African artists and a platform, because we're very under documented, or in fact we're not even there. We can't find our cultures. Is preservation, is educating each other, is protecting each other, is making the clearer future, well, a little bit more less cloudy for future generations, and to enjoy what to acknowledge, because I also find that from my part of upbringing, arts was very underestimated, underrated, and very much not understood. You had to be a teacher, an engineer, a doctor. You pushed it, pilot, but get creative. But art, writers, and also as I was growing up, this was never taught at school. Art was never something that was considered important, and I think it should be brought back to the curriculum. It's good for the mind. It's good. If it wasn't for art, I wouldn't seek for my heritage and culture, and I wouldn't appreciate that. And this is what the road trip is, and meeting people like, it was inspired by people like Bikidude, for example. I wish I had more time with Bikidude, because they carry so much history and knowledge that I don't think we'll have any opportunity to hear it again, because the elders have gone, and I don't think it was effortly documented to where, I would have loved to. So here
That sounds
it
incredible,
comes.
Mim.
It comes.
It
It's
does.
going to come out soon.
I can't wait to watch it. Sounds great. Well done. Ami, I just wanted to say, so we have 15 minutes left on this live, but if anyone watching has any questions, please send them in, and then Ami can tell them us it, and we can reply. Are there any so far, Ami? No?
Not at the moment, but could you tell us a little bit more about Beyond Skin as well? I know BuildaBriidge is a standing relationship, but I think I know the people watching on BuildaBriidge have heard about Beyond Skin from us many times. It'd be great to hear it straight from you about
please.
Of
Because we haven't
course,
talked about it.
I would love to. So I got involved with Beyond Skin, I want to say about 2 years ago, and it's been incredible. So Darren Ferguson is the one really in charge of it. He's the executive director, as you say, or CEO of Beyond Skin, and it's really about promoting peace through the arts as well. And there's just so much that's gone into different projects. For example, things I've been involved with, Cuerpos Gramaticales, which is a program between Colombia and Northern Ireland, which is where I am, and it's incredible. So I speak Spanish as well, so I kind of go in between the languages, and it's incredible to see. Each week we do different forms of art, and use plants especially in the ground, and it's great to just see how powerful arts are in making ways of peace between different people. So yeah, that's a brief summary of Beyond Skins, very brief. But yeah. Any questions, Amy? If not, I could ask Catherine one last question in the meantime.
Yeah, we have questions right now, so I think that would be great. I think, yeah, it'd be great to hear more from Kathy.
Thank you. I'd love to too. So it's not an easy one though, but so the condition of detention centers in the US have been criticized globally. Human Rights Watch describes these centers as jail-like border facilities and talks of inhumane conditions found in these centers, such as a lack of access to clean clothing, toothbrushes, and proper beds. Children are also reportedly separated from their families and looked after by minors. With this in mind, in 2019, the UN News wrote an article stating that the UN Rights Chief was appalled by US border detention conditions and says holding migrant children may violate international law. So my question to you, Kathy, is do you agree with the UN Rights Chief? What is your opinion on detention centers in general?
I agree 100% with the UN Rights Chief. I don't believe that really any migrant should be detained. The truth is that we had, prior to the current federal administration, we had used with resounding success ankle monitors. And quite frankly, we wouldn't need to use anything if we were appropriately staffed to hear immigration cases so that people didn't linger in a vulnerable state while they waited for their immigration case. What happened is the current administration came in and blatantly lied that ankle monitors don't work, and then created even more backlogs to the system by laying people off and not staffing people up, so that many, many more immigrants were left vulnerable than had been previously. And then they said, well, there's nothing for it. You know, while they're waiting, they're not legally here. And so we have to detain them. That's just a bald-faced lie. There's no reason to detain someone who is seeking legal status, particularly someone who's able to make a prima facie case that they are eligible for legal status. Something that is really not well known and well understood by the public is one of the many horrors of the American immigration system. The civil litigation system in the United States, that is the system that has been created to address civil problems such as child custody, child support, mortgage foreclosure, landlord-tenant matters. All of those matters is a very common procedure that when you petition the court for relief, if you can make out what's known as a prima facie case, that is, if you can prove that if all the evidence was true, you would be legally entitled to the relief that you seek. It is a normal procedure in American civil law to grant temporary relief pending the final decision by a judge. Immigration is the opposite. It's essentially guilty until proven innocent. And so what that does is you come in, you have a claim, you file your claim, you can show that if there was a hearing, you'd be able to prove everything, but the immigration system doesn't care and leaves you in an undocumented status until your hearing. Well, even before the current administration, when hearings were months and sometimes years from filing, that leaves you in a terrible position while you're waiting. Now, the administration has created a situation where it's almost a decade before your case is heard. And during that period of time, you don't have authorization to work, you aren't given any temporary status, and you're treated like a criminal. So that is an injustice that goes contrary to everything, not only that our country stands for, but that our Constitution provides, which is due process of law. It is not, it violates our notion of due process to leave someone in this position even after they have made what I have called that prima facie case, even after they have filed. One of the things that people don't understand when they talk about numbers of undocumented people is that many, if not most of these people are people that are eligible for legal status under our laws. And not only are they eligible, they have filed for that legal status and are waiting for court dates. So what our government has done has placed residents in a vulnerable status. It is exactly the opposite of what anyone would want a government to do. If you think about, in very general, oversimplified terms, what is the object of a government, right? The object of a government is to create stability for its people. We have destabilized hundreds of thousands of people, and in the process have destabilized communities. There was an article in the New York Times just a couple of days ago about the enormous rise in people seeking food at food banks. Who are many of those people? Those are immigrants who are eligible for public benefits, but have pulled themselves out of public benefits because the current administration has created a public charge rule, which renders them unable to seek legal status if they seek public benefits. And so what has that done? Has that caused people to go back to countries that they fled? Of course not. That has simply caused them to then put more pressure on our very fragile safety net system by going to food banks and accessing things that that were meant to really feed people that have no other option. But what our government has done has created thousands, if not millions of people who have no other options. That's not a functioning government. That is a government in opposition to its own people.
Thank you so much, Catherine. I think if I'm right that Kerry had a question for us. Ami, if you wouldn't mind reading that out.
Sure. Carrie asks, I would love to know if the four of you have been connected before or have any plans to connect on projects in the future. So if it's okay, I'll field that first. I was put in touch with Beyond Skin via an Israeli and Palestinian dialogue and music project called Heartbeat. And then when I ended up working with BuildaBriidge, it was a natural synthesis to engage BuildaBriidge with Beyond Skin. And that first engagement is when I got to meet Mim and play music and learn from Mim. And we've actually had the opportunity to share the stage twice together. And the second time was really beautiful. It was at a conference on trauma, one of the first conferences ever in Belfast on trauma. And I'll tell you, as soon as the next planes start allowing me to Northern Ireland, I'm going to be right there in Belfast again. And as I mentioned earlier, Highest is a longtime partner with BuildaBriidge. And as soon as we have funding to be able to engage the refugees of Highest more, we'll be doing more partnership. It's just the funding, like Kathy mentioned, the funding is just not there to do the kind of work that we want to do. So we've had to pivot a little bit from the charge of working with refugees and some of the peripherized portions of society at the moment because of COVID, but we're going to get back to it and get back to it strong.
Yeah, and I just want to add, I haven't had the pleasure of meeting Mim or Pamela or Arianna before today, but yes, we treasure our partnership with Ami and with BuildaBriidge. We, of course, work with all of our clients are traumatized at various levels. We work with children, we work with victims of domestic violence, as well as victims of torture. And Ami is such a critical connector for us and for our clients. You know, I I see the healing that his work creates in our refugee kids who've had the opportunity to work with AMI. And we would look forward to many, many future robust partnerships on behalf of our clients.
Okay, and I'd like to say we've cooperated before with Beyond Skin. We had a One World Festival, a cultural event, and it was very nice. It's the only organization out of the others that we've cooperated with, but we listening to you guys, I realize that humans are the same everywhere, and we seem to have similar problems. So I would like to have more cooperation in the future with everyone. Thank you.
Mim, you're muted.
Have you unmuted
Yes.
me?
Now we can hear you.
Yeah. So I said, basically, yes, this has been amazing opportunity for us to meet, and that I feel we've only just scratched the surface of every topic, and there's more to come. And I feel like these will connect the dots very, very soon. A cobweb that will bring a lot of, I feel a lot of positive results. I really do feel like that, yes. And I can't wait to meet Kathleen and Pamela and Arianna, like for proper face-to-face hug, post Cove.
I can't agree more with what Mim said. I can't wait for future collaboration with everyone here. It's been incredible, even researching to ask everyone questions, seeing their background and what they're specialized in and what they've done. It's so inspiring, and I'd love to continue connections with everyone involved. I'm sure there will be future projects with everyone. Sadly, I think that's all we have time for today. First and foremost, I would like to say thank you to Ami from BuildaBriidge for partnering with Beyond Skin on this project and being such a great support to us, especially technology-wise. This event couldn't have taken place without you, Ami, at all. So thank you.
Very welcome.
Thank you to Catherine for taking the time out of her extremely busy schedule to share with us the wisdom, primarily to do with refugee rights, but thank you so much. And I'm inspired by you and all you've achieved and all you have to come, truly. Thank you to Pamela for sharing so much on the legal situation in Zambia. Sorry, I'm hearing myself repeated. I don't know if you can. No? Good. It was extremely eye-opening and showing us why human rights are so important and need to be protected. Both law and societal attitudes must change in order for full protection of human rights to be achieved. Last but certainly not least, Mim, thank you for taking the time to be with us and teaching us more about your journey and the persecution faced by people with albinism. To everyone watching, thank you so much for being with us today in celebration of human rights. I hope you've learned as much as I have. If you've missed this, please watch it on demand on BuildaBriidge's YouTube platform. And that's it. Thank you so much. I don't know if anyone has anything to say, but thank you.
Thank you.